Good morning, guys. Today, I want to talk about the three tiers architecture imposed by central banks on digital banking systems as well as fintech systems. We have the infrastructure diagram at the top where we state the decision taken. Down here, we have the architecture decision records where we try to justify our decision by stating or clarifying the why. Let's start with the diagram here. We have a mobile application and a web portal used by a retail customer and a corporate customer. All incoming requests has to go through the traffic controller, which is a web application firewall. The public zone here, or the presentation tier, is the first or the infrastructure element exposed to the outside world through the WAF. In order for this request to access the data, which is the target of any incoming request to our data centers, it has to go through the application zone. Any attempt to access the data directly from the public-facing zone is prohibited in this kind of separation architecture. So there is no telnet, no SSH, no ping, or any kind of possible physical access. Each area is a different subnet or what we call VLAN. They have no physical access. Public zone has no physical. It doesn't actually see it. It has to go through the other VLAN in order to access or subnet in order to see the data zone. And usually we have an internal firewall where the ports are opened for corresponding services. Similarly, application services, for instance, like a retail service or a corporate service, probably a CMS as well used by the administration staff there. We could have as well a middleware service responsible of communicating with internal systems like the core banking or external system like the payment gateway or some credit history system used by the bank. So these are potential app services that needs to have their ports opened here on this firewall, and every data instance like the message broker, for instance, let's say the customer is using Kafka. Here, let's take FlexCube from Oracle. We have an Oracle database plus Redis. So all these ports need to be open to be accessed by the application service. Now, when you go into details with the central bank officers, the main idea with this subnet separation is that the folks, the security officers, even in the banks, they assume that an attacker was able to bypass the web application firewall through any kind of tool we are not aware of, and is able to sit here through command line, probably a vulnerability on the operating system side here has led him to do that. Usually patches comes after several months of knowing about the breach. So once the attacker is here through command line, for instance, he will not be able to do any kind of attempts or access the data because of physical separation. That's the idea behind the separation. It's a security policy, it's a security concern. Even though the WAF, for instance, has all the top 10 OWASP vulnerability checks and all the kind of traffic control checking, you have to always assume that an attacker is able to access your public zone. When we say WAF, the most used one in the banking sector is F5. You have Citrix as well if you want to or do an interim solution from a price perspective, because F5 is the most expensive. You also have Barracuda, Qualys, etc. So that's the main idea, guys, of having a 3-tiers architecture. Now this is the decision taken from the diagram here. Let's try to justify our decision through this architecture decision record here. Zooming out a bit. All right. So that's how we write an ADR. The ADR starts with the number, then the title. It has a status that can be approved, it can be rejected, or superseded in case a different decision is taken later on. Now in the context side, I said this several times and I'm obliged to repeat that because this is a mistake I often see. We only state the scenario or the situation. We are in a highly regulated environment. It's not in the decision is not ours as architect. Plus, you state the alternatives. You don't take the decisions yet in the context section. You take the decision here under this area. Plus, you use an affirmative tone. You don't say, we think, because I often see that, we think we should use. No, we will use. We are confident. We want to justify our decision. That's why we are confident. Then we go into stating the why behind taking the decision, as I explained above. Finally, the most important part is the trade-off part. We need to clarify the trade-off of taking such decisions. First, adding this kind of subnet separation have a huge complexity added into our development effort even. Now you can use the one solution I've been through, because originally we used to write our own API gateways back in before 2010. But nowadays the best way to do it is to go through an existing gateway. Don't write your API gateways anymore. Even if you want to write it, use some existing frameworks. Don't write it yourself, because it gives you lots of additional benefits out of the box. One of them is, for instance, the rate limiting, for example. Plus, it gives you protocol translation. Several banks are still using SOAP messaging format instead of JSON, for instance, when traversing server-to-server communication here. In fintech system, I use gRPC. But several banks are still relying on SOAP because they think SOAP, they are right about that, is the only one that is still do authentication or encryption on the message level itself, which is under the hood it is using XML, and rest JSON from the outside world here. So protocols translation mean translating JSON to SOAP or gRPC. Among other benefits like authentication, caching, and logging, etc. You have all these features without writing. It's in just you configure the gateway. Kong is one of the API that can be tried. So this for added complexity, instead of a simpler two tiers architecture. The second thing is the latency, which impose a performance degradation, because every time you have an additional network hop, you have to jump from here, then here, which is normal, and this can be solved with several mitigation techniques and or technology. One of them is the gRPC, which is super fast. So that's it, guys. This is the diagram, and that is the architecture decision record, where we always need to state the why. State the why behind every architecture decision you take, and log it, put it in the source control, put it on Confluence, wherever your infrastructure can let you do that, to put the files or share with other team members. Even you, after 10 months, you will love it, because you know you have a record that can tell you why you took this decision. That's it, guys.